The Badge to the Bone podcast contains adult language, mature themes, psychological nudity. Viewer discretion is advised. The opinions expressed here are ours and ours alone. Buckle up.
All right, welcome back to Badge of the Bone podcast. I'm Denny,
I'm Mal.
and we have another episode. Al, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's get after it.
Let's do it.
I've given up on society, up on my family, up on your social disease. I've given up on the industry, up on democracy.
Hey, Al,
Hey, Denny.
and how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
So we have a great guest.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, a guest I've been looking forward to having.
Yeah, we've actually talked about it several times, and what's great is it's actually somebody that I know personally and had the pleasure to work under their command. So I'm definitely excited to have him on.
And I do not. This is my first time actually speaking with him. So, yeah, I'm excited.
But you're
because
familiar because you read his book.
I did.
Which was pretty cool. And I remember you bringing that up, that you brought that book up and said, man, we need to get this guy on. I'm like, I know that guy.
Yeah. Well, the book in question is Toxic Boss Blues,
Yes, sir.
and it came out in 2014, and it was written by our guest, retired Captain Steve Neal, and he comes to us with about a little over 29 years of total law enforcement experience. He worked a very wide range of assignments over the course of his career, from uniform operations, criminal investigations, covert ops. He was director of the Emergency Communications Center, director of training, support services commander, and he was the inspector of the Office of Professional Standards. He's got a really wide, comprehensive knowledge base. He has worked extensively in developing public safety workforces. He has expertise in covert operations, and he has a particular affinity with media relations.
Yep.
And over the course of the years since he has retired, I know he is pretty active on the speaking circuit.
He is. Yeah, more than
and the
likely.
training circuit.
Yeah, more than likely, folks have probably come across Steve. And Steve, welcome to Badge of the Bone podcast.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you, and thanks for having me on. I look forward to a good conversation.
Absolutely. And again, it's great to see you because, as I said, I had the pleasure to work for you, and I can definitely attest to what we're going to talk about and what's in your book. That everything is right on point, and you were definitely you were a captain when I was there, and I always had really good memories of working under your command. You were always that supervisor that was well thought of with the way you supported the officer. Some of the supervision, we'll get into that, with the toxicity, but you were just always very supportive, very encouraging. I don't think I ever saw a time where you're just angry and not happy to be there and pleased to be doing the work we do. So I think that is contagious, but I always appreciated that. And you were just good times to work for.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. I'll tell you a little story to start off that might give you a little background about who I am and why I behaved like I did. When I was a young fellow in Kentucky, growing up in Kentucky, I played basketball. And one day I had just turned 18 years old, and three of my buddies called me up and said, "Hey, let's go play some ball." I said, "Yeah, let's go." So we jumped in the car. Next thing you know, we weren't playing basketball. We were acting like 13 and 14-year-olds instead of 17 and 18. The driver had one of these full-face masks he pulled over his head and put a cigarette in his mouth and a hat on backwards. Next thing you know, we were riding around scaring people, making funny noises and acting like really immature kids. Well, we thought it was very funny. We were laughing. I was riding in the back seat, really is all I did, but we were laughing, thought it was cute. But the teller at a bank in one of the strip malls we were in didn't think it was quite so funny. So she called local police, said four men in guns and masks were getting ready to rob the bank. And
Oh,
as you can imagine, the police took that very seriously. About 20 cars zoomed us. Officers pointed guns at us, threatened to kill us, got us out of the car, handcuffed me, threw me on my face on the ground with handcuffs behind my back, talked to us ugly, took us to the precinct. And next thing you know, me, Mr. 18-year-old, just turned 18-year-old, was in the county jail. So that experience was very negative to me. I had no relationship with police prior to that, no family members, nothing. I had no relationship with police. So suddenly I had a very bad attitude towards law enforcement and the whole system. It took a while to get that situation resolved, but once I got that situation resolved, I said to myself, I didn't like the way that happened. I didn't like the way the police treated me. I didn't like the way the courts treated. I didn't like any of the whole process. So I said to myself, I'm going to get in this business, law enforcement, and I'm going to do all I can do to make a difference. I'm going to make a change in this business. And that's how I got into law enforcement again with. And that's why it was always very important to me to be polite, respectful, and appropriate in all of my dealings with everybody.
Man, that is a pretty remarkable story. I tell you, that is really tremendous, because so many people do have, or will have a negative contact with the police. It happens, but to make the decision that, they need to do better. So I'm going to join up and I'm going to help them do better. That's
Right.
it's
pretty
being
significant.
it's being the change you're looking for
Yeah,
in the most literal way.
absolutely. And that's pretty rare. I tell you, that's pretty remarkable.
And I taught leadership my whole career. I was in management and leadership positions my whole career. So I spent all of my time focused on that very thing. Let's see if we can do this well and make it better. And that helped me to have really a pretty good career, even though there was some interesting situations along the way that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So you wrote the book Toxic Boss Blues, and we both have read that, and know it was just kind of funny that Al had read that before we even started this podcast.
I read it back in 2015.
Right. And that's what gets me, Steve, is really when you wrote this book and you put that out, you really didn't talk about supervision being toxic, or you didn't talk about supervision being anything less than the stellar gods that they were. I mean, it was, you really just did not cross that line. It was, you did what you were told, and you should be happy that you're working for whoever it is you're working for, and
Don't question the king.
don't question. Right. And it really just, you were so ahead of the curve with that.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I've been told many times in my career, if you don't like it, you can leave. So it's at the time during the course of my career, I had some experiences with some toxic bosses, and at the time there was no resources, there was nowhere to turn, nobody to talk to. It wasn't something, as you said, that was discussed. So when I decided to retire, I said, I've been talking about this and dealing with this all of my life. I want to write this book, and maybe we can help somebody else. Maybe we can help another officer who finds themselves in similar circumstances.
Well, I think it does. I think Al will attest to that, that if you're dealing with those situations, just reading that somebody else was going down that road and facing that too, okay, well, it's not just me and my age. It's not me that's just facing this, and I'm not making it up in my head. This is a real problem. It's a real issue that several are facing.
When I read it, it hit me like a lightning bolt. I was, oh my God. So I mean, somebody's speaking to the situation that and I wasn't alone, but I and others are living through right in the here and now. And it was just, I'd never read anything like that. And again, this was 9 years ago.
You didn't
8 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, but like I said, folks didn't write, so you didn't even say it. You didn't speak about it. So it's just amazing how, ahead of the curve you were for that. And now it's, take us on, even though it's still an issue, but now it's more receptive, a little more. I mean, a long ways to go, but
Oh yeah.
it's now something that's being received a little bit more, and people are paying more attention to, and folks are not being afraid to speak about it. So definitely, I think your book is even more relevant now than it was at that time. I think it was just ahead of its time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I think you're right about that, actually. So I've had a number of people from all over the country, in fact, a couple of other countries outside the USA contact me and say, man, this book really helped me. So some will say things like, it saved my career, or, it was really important to me at the time. So that's what it's all about. And, that's the reason why I wrote it. And that's what makes you feel good.
Well, the question that I have is, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Because again, you wrote this book in 2014. I know I read it in 2015. And only really, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Denny or Steve, really only probably in the last 3-4 years have we started to have a conversation about what the hell is wrong with some of our executive
absolutely.
leadership.
Yeah. It's brand new.
And the other part of this, and then I'll let you respond, Steve, because I really want to hear what you have to say, is I have a working theory. It's not backed up by data in any way. But my theory is that a lot of officer mental health struggles are driven by what happens inside police headquarters, not what goes on the street. And that is the biggest stressor.
I think you're absolutely 100% spot on. I know it was in my career, and I've seen it, unfortunately, with far too many others. I think there's something I wrote in the book, and it goes like this: we understand and accept as law enforcement officers that we have a possible threat from the street. We understand that. But the threat from the enemy within sometimes is a far bigger threat and can cause far more damage. So I think you're 100% spot on. This is an issue that needs to be addressed for our business, and it needs to be addressed for the mental health of the officers, and the fact that where they'll leave a career, it's an absolute fact that people they flee from bosses. Rarely do they flee from their career. Most often, when people leave a business, they leave the business because they're fleeing a bad situation that they're dealing with. So I think you're 100% spot on.
I think that too is an accurate assessment.
Yes.
People don't leave jobs, they leave toxic leaders.
Absolutely.
So, and that goes back into, how did we arrive at this?
I believe what's probably the case on that is law enforcement has historically been been set up very much like the military, a paramilitary type operation. And what that means is if you're a higher rank or you're a higher position, then you're considered to be right. And you never were really considered able to question that. The authority came from the top, and if I'm a captain and you're a sergeant, then you do what I tell you. And I think that's how we got to this point. I think we have gotten people in high positions who have a little bit of ego driven problem, and they're not looking out for the best interests of the troops. They're looking out for what's best for them. And maybe they don't have the skills to solve this problem other than saying that's an order. And when anytime a supervisor or a leader says that's an order, they've lost the battle already at that point. That you should never have to say that. I never said it in my career. It wasn't necessary because I was able to get people to do what I wanted them to do because they believed in the leader and they followed along willingly.
So if we're going to go with the paramilitary model as an illustration, we end up with and if I can talk about Band of Brothers, because I think that's a great example of leadership, we end up with more Captain Sobels than we do Captain Winters.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen that miniseries, Steve.
No, I'm not familiar with that particular show.
But yeah, I mean, the the folks he's referring to, you really have the guy that can bark and scream orders and make you do things through fear and intimidation, and then was completely inept in the field, completely inept, couldn't make a battlefield decision. And then you have the other leader who was a very strong leader, could make great battlefield decisions, and was very tactically sound. And folks followed him because of his competence, because they believed in him and his abilities, and they followed him. He didn't have to do like you say, that's an order. He didn't have to go that route.
No,
Well,
never.
Never.
to follow on what you're saying, you're absolutely on point. To follow on that, you'll see people who well, if you're given a position, then you have a certain amount of positional authority. But that only goes so far. I mean, I can order somebody to do X, Y, Z. That only goes so far. If I'm a leader, people choose to follow me. And when they choose to follow me, then they're going to knock a door down for you if you just even make a hint of a suggestion. And that's all I had to do. I would just, suggest where we wanted to go or what we needed to think about or talk about, and the guys would be knocking the doors down to get there.
No, that's great. And I know because we talked before this recording, we had some conversation, and I know we talked about leaders, the toxic leaders, but they're going to put other toxic leaders in positions because they're going to support their agenda, and that adds to it when you have these promotional processes and you have folks that are not chosen for their competency in the job, but more chosen for the fact that they're going to carry the agenda of the chief or the executive.
That's why it's so important to have the right people at or near the top, because whoever are making those selection decisions, they're going to have people that are similar to themselves in those positions. So if you're a toxic boss, they're going to choose other people who are toxic, who are just going to do what they tell them to do. And so who's at the top of your organization goes a long way in determining what happens the rest of the way down the chain.
Do you think that this problem is overrepresented in the law enforcement community?
Yes, I absolutely do. There are toxic bosses in every business and every industry, but you can talk to a police officer anywhere in this great country, anywhere, large department, mid-size or small, and they're going to tell you very similar stories about what they're dealing with their bosses. So yes, I do think it's overrepresented in our particular business. And there's probably quite a few reasons for that, but this is why it makes it such an issue for us with the mental health and the success of our officers, because this is maybe not the right word, they're being taken advantage of at best. You could say abused if you wanted to call it that, but they're being treated poorly by the people that are supposed to represent them. And this is a nationwide problem. You can find it in every single agency. I've talked to literally thousands of officers all over the country, and they all speak the same way.
Yeah, we find these agencies around the country. A couple jump to mind where the chief has basically thrown the proverbial hand grenade into police headquarters, and then done the dramatic walk away from the explosion, only to land softly somewhere else and do it all over again,
Leaving scorched earth behind him.
whereas if one of us screwed up that badly, we'd never work in this profession again.
Out.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. You see it over and over again. And I think the main problem there is that the people that are making the selections for chief are politicians. So depending on the quality of your politician, and I know those two things don't really go together, quality and politician. But
No, they do
depending
not.
on the quality of your politician, they're going to want to choose somebody that's going to implement their vision, won't give them a whole lot of gruff, and will just say yes sir, 3 bags full. So I think the wrong people too many times are getting chosen for the top of the police profession, because we still today have a lot of really, really strong officers throughout this country who are doing fantastic work, but they're being led by the wrong people at the top in too many cases.
I'll add that I think we have some extraordinary leaders. I know
Yes.
we give leadership some grief sometime, but we do have some great leaders in this profession. I think the problem is they get drowned out by the ones that are not great at all.
Yep.
Steve, let
Well,
me
I'll
ask
give you a
you.
numerical
Go ahead.
example that backs that up. Yeah, I'll give you a numerical example that backs that up from my own personal experience. The agency that I was on, our whatever they called the command team, which was your captains and above, we had about 16 people on that team at the top of the organization, the leadership team. Of those 16 people, we had three that the troops considered to be good leaders and people that were respected and people that everybody said, this is a good guy or gal. This is where we want to be. That was 3 out of 16, and I think that illustrates the point you just made.
That's a
I,
that's a pretty low percentage.
I was there. That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's disheartening at the the level at the time at the level I was at, where you're like, geez, you're looking around, there's not so many that I would follow when things go south, and it doesn't leave you with a lot of confidence. It just doesn't.
This kind of goes back to that conversation we were having before we even started about the command staff qualifications.
Oh gosh.
The command staff firearms qualifications. Let me be specific.
Oh yeah. I remember that was a big thing. Was they had a separate qualification day for command staff, separate from the other officers, and only command staff came in and qualified. And we used to joke like, okay, let's get the silver trays ready with the towels and the little glasses of water, so we can stand on the line with the water and the towels for them, so they can have a little sip of water and get ready for the next round. But what it was is someone just, the ego came in and they had a problem shooting next to someone of a lesser rank that shot better. I'm like, who cares?
That's right, and
Everybody
you
shoots
know
different.
it is silly when you have toxic organization, a lot of toxic leaders at the top. You'll see a lot of examples of things like that. I'll give you another example similar to that. Is these designated parking spaces right outside your admin building, whatever that is. And if you're not a big cheese, you can't park in this spot. And that sends absolutely the wrong message that we would want to send as a leadership team. But in a toxic organization, you'll see that you'll see plenty of different things that shows clearly that I'm the boss here and you're not. And that's about the worst. That's about the worst thing that can be done.
It's funny you mention that, because obviously, we had that. We had those designated parking spots. And I don't know if you're familiar with the chief that's there now. He's a little bit different. He's a little more unconventional in his thought. And I noticed, because I pulled in there shortly after he got there, and his designated parking sign was pulled out, was gone. It had been removed. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And the others were still there. And I remember he had visited for a roll call and came and wrote, and I asked him, I said, I noticed your parking space. I said, I don't see the chief space anymore. He said, I don't need a parking space. He said, the people that get to park there are the ones that get to work the earliest. He said, if I get to work later in the day, then I park in the back. And I asked him, I said, so is everybody else or the other space is gonna fall suit? And he told me, I'm not gonna say anything. We'll wait and see. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a test. So, but they ended up going away. But he kind of suggested in not so many words that, yeah, we're going to wait and see, but they better make the right choice. And all those designated spaces went away.
That's right. Thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for him. I'll tell you that I tested that. I was always one that would push the boundaries a little bit, and I tested it a couple times at our agency. And I'm gonna tell you what, I was chewed up one side and down the other on 2 different occasions for parking in somebody's spot. So
That's awesome.
I was glad to see that go away.
That's just so funny that you push it. I think that's awesome, because that used to drive me crazy. I'm like, really? Come on. You got to have your own designated space.
Yeah.
My agency didn't have that, believe it or not.
Wow.
But we did have the chief wouldn't come out and qualify with the
Yeah.
rest of the officers.
It's silliness. Just silliness.
I never understood it.
You know, another example, real quick, while we're talking about that, I just thought of it while we were talking. We had a big discussion in a command staff meeting one day, and back at the time, our staff people were wearing different color shirts. We're wearing white shirts, where everybody else was wearing the uniform shirt. So I brought it up that I didn't think that was a good idea, and I felt like we're all working on the same team. We should all be wearing the same uniform, and so forth, so on.
Oh
Well,
gosh.
anyway, Chief opened up and said, "Let's have a discussion about that." So one of the guys that supported it, he started saying, oh, he's in the white shirt, and that tells everybody I'm in charge, and da da da. I stand a little taller, this, that, and other. And my comment right in the staff meeting was, I says, the color of my shirt does not make me a leader. I said, I can show up on scene in a flannel shirt, and I can still make it clear that I'm in charge. So it got real quiet. That shut everything
I can
down.
imagine.
Yeah, it got real quiet when I said that. Everybody was like, "Oh, what's going to happen now?" And sure enough, shortly after that, we went away with the white shirts. But little things like that, or make it clear which agencies are more toxic and which ones aren't.
Steve, let me ask you this question, because I got to thinking about it just now. All the controversies that law enforcement has had since 2020, do you think that has probably exacerbated this problem?
Yes, I don't think there's any question about it. And it's a multi-pronged answer, so we'll try to keep it reasonably short. But I think one of the issues is that law enforcement has not reacted properly from the top. In other words, the story that we're telling, the way we talk about the incident that happened, the way that we talk to the public, I think that some of these toxic bosses are not very skilled. And oftentimes I see a chief or somebody go on TV after some major incident, and I'll just be shaking my head going, that's pathetic. I mean, we could have done that much, much better. So I think that a lot of these toxic bosses are scared, if you want to know the truth about it. I think they're trying to protect themselves. And I think because of that they're not taking the appropriate actions, which includes the presentation to the public, but and supporting the officer when they're right. So I think oftentimes we are not, we're looking scared ourselves. We're standing in front of a camera with our teeth chattering rather than going out there and saying, this is what happened, boom, 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 this is the way it is, and then move on to the next thing. If the officer's right, you got to stand behind them. And I think a lot of these political chiefs won't do that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Al.
Can you expand on what you mean by political chiefs? I think I know, but kind of like for our audience to hear it.
Sure. Well, one thing that everybody has to understand about the law enforcement business, a chief of police, as an example, is appointed by a politician. Okay. And when you're appointed, you can also be removed, and you can be removed basically for nothing. So, what a lot of these chiefs, they care more about themselves and their pension and their career than they do about the troops that they're appointed to lead. So, a lot of these chiefs will do what is in their best interest when it comes down to something tough like this, or what they perceive to be in their best interest, rather than doing the right thing and standing behind the officer or explaining to the public, this is what happened, this is what needed to happen, boom, boom, boom. So that's what I mean by a political chief.
And I believe that so many chiefs, excuse me, get stuck in this self-preservation mode. And like you said, they can be removed. They're appointed, they can be removed. And I get that. And I get nobody wants to lose their job. Nobody wants to lose your income. But I also think that when you take on that responsibility, and I feel like when you take on that position, is what you sign up for. That, from there on out, your decisions are made for the agency. They're not made for the individual, and you make decisions that are the right decisions, regardless of whether they align with whoever is in that political position. And if you get removed, then, you get removed. But I do feel, again, I understand nobody wants to lose their job. But when you step into that position, that is that risk you take. That is what you sign on for. You don't sign on for, hey, I'm going to get this position and just do what I can to save myself. But it seems like that's what happens.
100% agree. And the term that I use when we talk about that is backbone. Sometimes when you're in a leadership position, you have to make some tough calls, and sometimes they're not pretty, and sometimes they're not going to be popular. But that's when a chief with integrity, who's doing the right thing, has to exercise their backbone, and they have to make the call regardless of who likes it. And it's far too often in today's world we don't see that.
Yeah, it is, and it's unfortunate.
It's probably been even encouraged by the fact that, we just mentioned, like, the chief can slag one department, parachute into another department, but how many of the, hey, I got this chief's job, I want to get the next bigger chief's job.
Right.
I want to get the speaking engagements. I want to get the book deal.
Sure.
And it just compounds.
Sure.
There's no question about it. Far too many of our so-called leaders today are looking out for their own self-interest rather than doing the right thing.
Now I know, again, we've discussed it, and I'd definitely like to have you touch on it again, where you had a pretty bad stint with a toxic boss, which was your chief.
Yeah,
And
I had some incidents through the years, of course, and I always fought for the right thing and did the right thing. But when I was about 21 years on, I was a captain, and the chief of police called me into his office one day and told me to close the door. So it was just me and him behind closed doors. And he said, Steve, I want you to do X, Y, Z. He laid out a situation he wanted me to do for him. And I said to him in a very polite and respectful way, I said, Colonel, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to execute XYZ because I don't believe it's ethical. It's just outside my personal boundaries. And I'm sorry, but I just can't do it. Well, he immediately went off on me and started yelling, cussing, calling me names, threatening my career, telling me I was disloyal and a traitor and so forth. Just immediately went
Jeez.
off. And part of the reason was, of course, he knew it was an illicit order. And now that I'd said no to him, he had a bit of a problem himself. So he threw me out of his office, and that started a year-long battle with the toxic boss, and it got worse and worse and worse, unfortunately. In fact, it got so bad that at some point, my peers were coming up to me after a meeting and going, Steve, what is wrong? I mean, it's obvious that there's something really wrong between you and this chief. And of course, I didn't share it with a lot of them. But this battle went on for a whole year, and it got worse and worse. And he was doing a lot of bad things. And one of his favorite things he did to me was he would call me into office and he'd start cussing and calling me names and threatening me. In fact, one day he put his finger in my chest and he said, I'm going to get you.
Oh,
And
wow.
my comment back to him was at that point, and I wouldn't recommend this to anybody else, but it's what I said. My response to him back was, well, you better come big or stay at home because I'm not going to roll over and play dead. So once again, he kicked me out of the office, cussed me. He was trying to humiliate me in public meetings. It was got to be really bad. So after about a year, I didn't know what to do. I was in a position he was the top man. I had a 21-year career, a good career going, had no resources, had no friends. I didn't know how to react. And I'm going to tell you, this kind of goes to what you guys have been working on with this podcast. There was a lot of psychological and mental stress that I was under. I mean, I'm facing this battle with the boss, and the boss is threatening me. The boss is cursing me. He's calling me all kinds of names. The boss is threatening to end my career. I was under a lot of stress. During that point, I couldn't sleep. I honestly went on sleeping medication during that time because I couldn't sleep. I gained weight. I was really struggling mentally to survive this battle. And this is how I know, and you guys know, that this is an important piece of what y'all are doing right now with the mental health of officers. This is what they're facing when they're in a toxic boss situation. So finally, after a year, I had had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. And he called me into the office one day, like usual, and he was arguing about something or other. And I said what I said, and he was cussing me. And I looked him across the table, across the desk, just me and him one on one. And I said, "Stop it," in a very forceful voice. And he looked up at me and he said, "You got a problem, boy?"
Mm.
And I said, "I do have a problem." And I laid out for him very detailed four things that I thought were particularly egregious that he had done in the last year. And what I said to him was that these things that you're doing to me, it wouldn't be appropriate if I was doing them to someone under my command. And it's also not appropriate for you to do it to me. And what you're doing is creating a hostile work environment for me. That's what I told him. And I said,
Key
if
words.
that's key words. And I knew
Key
that, of
words.
course. And I followed that by saying, if I said, this bad behavior stops today. And I said, if we have even one more problem between you and me like this, I'm going to go to the county manager and I'm going to kick your effing doors wide open. That's what I told him. Now, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that particular language to anybody else, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you do have to confront the toxic boss, and when you do
Sure.
that, you have to be right. He got me angry, cussed me, threw me out of his office again, like usual, and from that point forward, the rest of his career there, he and I never had another public issue. He never said another cross word to me. It was never anything obvious out in the public. All of that stopped because I think I convinced him that I meant what I said. I mean, if he didn't stop his bad behavior, I was going to blow the doors open, and I meant it, and I was. But behind the scenes now, there was still plenty of issues, plenty of trouble. They assigned me to places I didn't want to work. It made sure I never got to do any special assignments that was good for me. I couldn't get promoted again after that. Always got turned down for promotion. They were checking my emails. They were listening to every time I turned in a report. Was it on time? There was plenty of harassment that went on afterwards, but it was never public after that. He never again said a public bad word to me from that point after that confrontation.
It's just childish. It's bullying behavior. I mean, just
Absolutely.
in the most classic sense. And I never worked for this chief. I never worked for your agency, but I can tell you that I know that chief's reputation and I was many agencies over, but that chief's reputation went well beyond the four walls of your headquarters.
Yeah, he was a bad man, I have to say. Now, in his public face, when he dealt with the public, he was all smiles and handshakes and Mr. Nice Guy. But
Of
when the
course.
door was closed, when the door was closed and it was behind the scenes, he was dirty. And it's just the way it is. So that was my personal experience, and I didn't have any resource. I didn't know where to turn or what to do. I just finally decided I had to confront him, and so I did, and that helped to a certain extent. But after I retired, then I said, you know what? I've been talking about this. I've been dealing with this all of my career. I'm going to write it down because maybe I can help somebody else. And that's how Toxic Boss Blues was born.
And you mentioned in your book, you talked a little bit about documentation and the importance of documentation. And I think that's something good to highlight because unfortunately, there's just a lot of toxic bosses out there that either rank and file are working for or your first line supervision. And that's the ones I always worry about is that first line supervisor and that middle management. Cause I feel like they always get caught in the middle of trying to kind of shield and help and lead their team to be effective, but they're taking so much from farther above from those toxic encounters. So I think for someone that's dealing with that, documentation, they need to read that book and really take to heart that documentation. Because if it does come to down where you're going to have to make, a complaint, or like you say, you're going to blow the doors open, you're going to need that documentation. There's a difference between saying, well, this happened and then this happened, or saying, well, on this date at this time, this happened and these people were present. At this date at this time, this happened and these people were present. To have that clear, record of what your allegations are, I think it makes a huge difference.
You're absolutely 100% spot on. The old saying goes, he who has the best evidence is going to win. It's the same way in a criminal investigation. So if you're involved in a battle with your boss like this, You've got to document everything. And that's when I had my confrontation with him. I told him in great detail these 4 particular incidents, and I had dates and I had witnesses, and I told him exactly so that he knew, this might be a problem, for me at some point. That's the number one, even though there's a whole chapter on how to address this in Toxic Boss Blues, that's the number one clue. If you're in a battle, you've got to document everything. That includes emails, conversations, dates, times, who said what you said. Every piece of information that you can document is going to be to your advantage if you have to confront.
Obviously, those rules would apply to what I'm about to mention, but what about those people that are much junior in rank, that have a lot less tenure? I mean, one thing, and not to diminish your situation whatsoever, but you had tenure and rank. What about that person who lacks both?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think they have to make a decision. It's an individual decision. How much am I willing to risk? And anytime you risk anything, whether it's this situation or anything else, or whether you're gambling in Vegas, anytime you risk something, you have to be willing to lose what it is that you put on the line. So I think in your scenario, the individual there has to make a decision. Am I willing to risk this? Am I willing to lose it if that happens to be what happens? And most of the time, you're not going to lose it, but it's certainly possible. I think that's an individual call.
Yeah, I think that's good, but I really do hope that everybody that listens to this goes and grabs a copy of Toxic Boss Blues. I mean, it really needs. It's a must read, and we say that on several books, but it definitely needs to be read.
I wish I could say that I had read it and didn't know what the hell it was talking about. I wish I could say that.
And I think most that read it are going to be going, "Oh wow, yeah, it's going to be very resonant with so many." That's why I think they need to go out and really read your book. It covers all of that.
Just the stress that comes from that situation, and especially if, again, you're lacking in rank, you're lacking in tenure by comparison to, say, somebody who's command staff. That feeling of helplessness that comes with this situation. Did you find that HR, for example, was of any help whatsoever?
Well,
And
I never
what
chose
would you
to go
say
to
to that?
HR. Yeah, I think it can be in certain circumstances. I never chose to go to HR because I felt like that once I went to HR, I was making an official complaint at that point. So I decided not to go to that option. Now, I did get to where I was looking for some personal attorneys a few times, just in case I had to have them, because I could see what happened. But I never did choose to go to HR because, you have to understand that when you're talking about an organization like a public safety agency, if there's a complaint made, let's say, against the chief, then that's going to be their job to protect that chief and protect
Yeah,
that agency.
yeah,
Because if that chief has done something wrong and they have bad publicity and so forth, that's going to reflect poorly upon the county or the city or whatever the case is. So I think HR's primary goal is going to be to protect the boss, but there are certainly circumstances where that is your next step.
yeah. And the thing is, too, with that legal coverage, FOP, PBA, they kick in when you actively are in trouble. Somebody's filed a charge against you. Now it's rolling through IA, or God forbid it's rolling through the criminal court system. Then they're going to step up. But in this situation, you're out of pocket.
Yeah. I think you're going to be on your own in a situation like this. And there again, it becomes an individual choice. Am I there? Is that what I want to do at that point?
Well, Steve, again, I got so much benefit out of this book personally. And again, I am so glad that you're here, that I finally get to talk to you in person. In light of everything that has gone on, again, particularly over the last probably 4 or 5 years in law enforcement, given any thought to doing another edition of this, updating it? Volume 2,
you're not the
Volume
first.
2.
Yeah, you're not the first guy that's asked me to do that. I haven't done it to this point. I have given it a lot of thought. So, it may well happen. Maybe this will be the thing that spurs me back into action.
I think that would be pretty awesome. I think we'd be lined up to get it. Not to put any pressure on you. I know it's a lot of work putting one together, but it amazes me just how relevant, you would hope that after all those years it maybe would have gotten better, but it hasn't. So, and it's so relevant right now.
Oh God, yeah.
So
It seems like it has gained, sadly, relevance.
right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a volume 2 would be, I think would be fantastic, but yeah, we're just throwing that out there.
Yep.
How do we
Great
cultivate that?
idea.
How do we cultivate that next generation of leaders so that we're not having this conversation in 10, 15 years?
Boy, that's a great
Well,
question too, and I think that's a tough one. I'll tell you. And the reason I think it's a tough one is because it seems like over the last few years, the idea of being political and worrying about yourself and sacrificing the officer seems to have gained speed over the last few years. So we have got to raise and teach and support and encourage young leaders who are willing to use that backbone and say no. No. See, that's what I did to the chief. The chief asked me to do something that was clearly outside my boundaries, and I said no. So, did I pay a price for it? Yes, I did. I clearly paid a price for it. But I think the only way that we're going to get around this is to continue to cultivate young leaders who are strong and who have integrity and who will do the right thing. And some of them will get through to the top. And if you got a good leader at the top, then they're going to have the birds of a feather around them. They're going to put good leaders around them, and I think that's how we work on it. It's not going to be easy for us to defeat this, but I do think we can make some progress.
yeah, I think that's good. I know you mentioned, because we've talked before, and you mentioned that, for anybody that might be going through this, that you're always available to reach out to. And I think you said your email would be the best way to reach out to you.
Yeah, anybody that's going through this and I can help in any way, even if it's just a conversation, I'm glad to do that. Contact me at steve@bearingwitnesstoevil.com, and I'll help you in every way that I can. I'm not an attorney, but I do have quite a lot of experience in this area, and I think I have some ideas. And I have, in fact, helped a number of people over the last few years who have come to me and said, "Hey, what do I do?" I mean, what do I do now? I mean, I'm in a bad spot. So anybody needs help out there, contact me. I'd be more than happy to talk with you.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that goes a lot. I mean, I think sometimes just if you're going through that, having somebody that's either been through it
Mm-hmm.
and experienced that to talk with you about it, just having that kind of backup will help
Let's
navigate
talk
through
about an
something.
example about that real quick. It just came to
Yeah.
mind while
Yeah.
we're talking about this. Real quick. An officer that I knew was the rank of police officer, a tenured officer, had been there 15 years or so. Had a few complaints made against him. He had a complaint this one particular time. The agency decided they were going to get rid of him. So they gave him the option of, you either resign or we're going to fire you. So that particular officer came to me and said, what do I do? He was in crisis. His family was in crisis, worried about losing his home and so forth. And we had a little conversation, and I talked to him about, amongst other things, about, you're going to land on your feet. And the old saying, when one door closes, another one opens. I said, something good's going to happen for you, because that's the way life works. If you're a good person, a good officer, and you're doing a good job, and you got a raw deal here, I say, I encourage them to go ahead and resign and look for another opportunity. Well, now, today, in just 5 short years, that person is now the chief of police at another agency, and he resigned from the one he was talking to me about. His family were in total crisis. Another opportunity opened up. Next thing you know, bang, 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 he got promoted 3 or 4 times, and he is currently the chief of police at another agency. So there's hope out there if you're facing a tough spot. Most of the time, most officers are going to land on their feet.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a wonderful story, because I can tell you nothing feels as cripplingly lonely as being in that situation.
Oh yeah,
That's correct.
yeah. Now I'm gonna before we wrap up, I did want to kind of swing back to when you in your email you mentioned your email Steve at bearingwitnesstoevil.com. That's a reference to your other book, Bearing Witness to Evil, correct?
It is. Bearing Witness to Evil has been out about 2.5 years now. I co-wrote that book with John Burkett, who is a local crime reporter in the Richmond area. It's a true crime book. And what we do in that book is we have taken 15 cases that were some of the most significant crime cases in the metro area over the last 40 years. But our criteria was that either I had to be a part of the case or Burkett had to be a part of the case, or both of us were part of the case. So we chose a whole bunch of cases that, if they're local, you'd be familiar with them, like the Southside Strangler and the
Yep.
Harvey murders and cases like that. They were very significant crimes. And then we told the crime story, but we also tell a story behind the story, because in every crime, there's always things that people don't know about. There's always circumstances behind the scene that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So we have 15 stories behind the stories, and some of those are absolutely incredible reads. And if a person is a true crime fan, if they enjoy that type of a story, I think they're going to really like this book.
Man, I have not read that yet, so I'm definitely going to make sure to get my copy because I'm always interested in that story behind the story, that
Yeah.
untold side of it. That to me is always fascinating.
And we both knew people that were
Yes.
involved
Yes.
in a lot of these, and these were very, very significant cases. The Harvey murder cases, that was an extremely significant case
Yep.
locally.
It was.
But well, the Southside Strangler, you guys might be too young to remember that.
No, I
But
remember that.
yeah, but that case was the most significant serial killer case in Richmond history.
Yep.
And that's one of the cases we featured. I just happened to be the young detective on that case. When the crime came in Chesterfield, the homicide in Chesterfield, I just happened to be on call and was a detective. So there's a lot of good stories in the book. Like I said, true crime fans are going to really like it.
Well, I know we're not normally in true crime, but every now and then we like to take a break from, the mental health aspect and leadership and do something that's just, a little bit fun and interesting. And I think if you're up for it, we'd be on board maybe after we take a good read of that, getting you back on board and talk about Bearing Witness to Evil. I think that'd be a great
Oh,
topic.
I think it would be a wonderful topic.
And maybe we could get hold of, I know John as well, talked to him several times when I was with the department. So definitely a good dude. And I think he would be on board. It'd be great if we had both of y'all on to talk about the book and you both could talk about the stories and the backstories and how y'all put it together. I think that would make a great episode.
Yeah,
If you're up for
that's a done deal. If you guys are interested, that's a done deal.
Awesome.
I'll get John and we'll make it happen.
Man, that'd be a lot of fun.
And for people in our audience that are not familiar with John Burkett, again, local crime reporter, he's probably one of the single best crime reporters in the country.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
he's good. And he's just a good dude.
I absolutely agree with that. I used to with John, since we were friends, working cases together and all. The first time I ever met him, it was at a homicide scene in Chesterfield, and I was the watch commander, and I was doing the press briefing, and this young kid showed up, and it was immediately apparent to me he was brand new, young reporter, and I could tell right away that he had something going for him. And from that point forward, we got to be friends, and we worked a lot of cases together through the years, and I still will go on and help him on some Channel 6 stories about crime and so forth. So he's a good guy. He is probably the best crime reporter around. I don't know anybody that's any better. And like I said, he'll be glad to come on and do the show with you.
All right, great. Then we'll work on getting that scheduled right out.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll be on board with that.
Would love that.
But Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
We really
But-
appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. It's been my pleasure. And, I always like to to talk about law enforcement issues, and in particular this issue, toxic boss, because it
Yep.
has such an impact on our officers. And my mission and my goal, and the reason I wrote that book, is to try to help an officer who was experiencing some difficulty. So thank you very much for your kind words.
Absolutely. And I guarantee more than one of our listeners are probably going to be grabbing that book.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can personally say that it helped me.
So yeah,
So
that's good. Knowing that we're getting that in somebody's hands, that it's going to provide some benefit. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
that was really great having Steve here.
It was good talking with him. I haven't really talked other than checking in with him to get him scheduled, but, we hadn't really had a chance to talk since he retired.
No, and as somebody who's read the book, again, my first time talking to him. So I hope to get to talk to him again.
Yeah, I think we will. I do think there's a lot of takeaways from his book.
Absolutely. And it is not a situation where all the leadership is like this. It's not.
No. And I hope somebody doesn't take it that way, but there is issues, and we know that we've talked about it. There's issues in leadership, and it causes stress, and it causes harm.
And it is arguably overrepresented in our profession.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. And I think we mentioned it in the podcast where, people don't leave the profession, they're leaving the bosses.
And I think he made a good point. As the job becomes increasingly political,
Yes.
or at least under the political microscope, this gets worse.
It does.
And it drives the rank and file's mental health issues. And on the cycle goes.
But, and that's why we need to talk about it. That's why these things need to be discussed. That's why it needs to be talked about. It's great having somebody who is or was in a command staff position and that's what's, really, I don't want to say it's different, but most of the time you hear it from lower level in toxic boss. You don't hear it that much from the higher level, having it from the even higher level. Because at that level, they really don't want to talk about it. It's, no, everything's sunny and wonderful here.
No, I think you're right. And then if it is somebody who's like a rank and file officer or a first line supervisor, they're just disgruntled. They're just this, they're just that. But you hear it from somebody who's really up there in the leadership hierarchy.
Yes.
And it should really grab
worked his way through the ranks, was promoted, and was in a command staff position, and sees a problem and calls it for what it is. So, I think that's great.
Yeah. So it was a really good conversation. But on to something else. We were supposed to be at the Vail Foundation Wellness Fair this weekend. And
a little bit of weather.
Yeah, due to a tropical storm making its way up the East Coast.
Yep.
We were not.
No. And it's a bummer, but that was the right call.
Yeah.
Because it was terrible. I mean,
we'd have been chasing our tent down the street.
Can't say that anybody would have really shown up in that type of weather. I mean, you really are hardcore for it if you're going to show up in that weather. But yeah, we'd have been chasing the tent down the street. The band, everything would have been floating down the street.
You'd have been chasing the tent down the street. I'd have been standing back laughing.
I'd have put some rocks in my pocket to keep me from blowing away out there. I mean, it was windy here.
But that has been rescheduled. This time it will be on October 7th. From 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the 511 store and the adjoining parking lot in Short Pump, Henrico County, Virginia. That's Metro Richmond for those folks that may not know. We will be there. We will be set up. We're looking forward to talking to folks that day.
Yep.
We may even be doing a little recording out there.
Yep.
I think this is going to be a wonderful event. I'm glad they didn't cancel it. I'm glad they got a new date.
Yes.
They're pushing forward.
And hopefully anybody that could attend this weekend is still able to make it on the 7th, but definitely making an effort to get there. I think it's going to be a really good event.
Yeah.
But Al, I think that wraps us up.
I think it does.
Another good episode.
Absolutely.
Where can they find us?
They can find us at badgetothebone.com. They can also find us on Facebook at Badge to the Bone.
Also, shoot us an email at wearebadgetothebone@gmail.com. And make sure to like and follow us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. But until then, be safe
And be well.
Ain't no mistake.